press.
Okay, there we go.
Got it.
40-minute process. 7:47.
All right, you fix it.
Yeah, I'll position it.
All right.
Okay, good.
All right.
Perfect. Oh, just in time. This was Ashkacha.
Hi, thank you.
Big crowd.
Yeah.
Big crowd.
My publicist. Hey, good evening, everyone. Please have a seat. We'll get started in a minute. It's true. It does have to do with it. So good evening once again. For those who usually look forward to the handouts, the problem is I have a time limit. I think I have to have it in by 3. And then when Andrea leaves the office, it was okay, but it was prepared too late, so that's why we don't have a handout. I hope please be mindful. No, we
We
don't.
could have 2 next week.
Something else. Yeah.
Could we
But
have
the-
2 next week?
2 handouts next week. We can do that. No, we don't have that. Okay. So actually, for those who are joining us for the first time tonight, welcome. And generally speaking, our shir every Wednesday night are pearls of Hasidic thought in relation to the Seder of the week, the Parsha of the week. We go to different Hasidic masters and their explanations of different insights of the Parsha. And as we saw a trend and a theme throughout all of them is that what Pnimis HaTorah, what Hasidus does to many of the stories of the Torah, the mitzvahs of the Torah, is to uncover sort of deeper layers in the sense that it's not just talking about a certain time and a certain place. It's talking to us now, here and now, because it's referring to a deeper spiritual reality that actually exists today. Now, usually we've done many different generations from 200 years ago to 100 years ago to different Hasidic masters and their teachings in relation to the Parsha. This week, we're going to be doing something a little unique, but in a way, I hope that we'll be able to, in a way, reach our goal that we try to do every week in an even stronger way. And that is, it's not too old, what we're learning tonight. It's actually 30 years old. 30 years old. It's 30 years ago, 1992. It's a beautiful Hasidic teaching and very powerful that the Rebbe taught. And, just a few weeks later was the Rebbe's stroke. And that was just one of the last talks that the Rebbe gave. And 30 years, yeah, it's 30 years already. And it's really, really a beautiful, it's really mosaic. And I'll tell you why. Because one of the things we mentioned slightly in the past, but now it's going to be a focus tonight, is the idea of Hashgacha Pratis. Everything is perfect. And, one of the things that Baal Shem Tov emphasized in his teachings was that everything that happens is happening exactly when it's supposed to happen, how it's supposed to happen. And specifically in Jewish life, meaning 1992 was the same calendar like this year. It was 2 others. It was Parshas Truma, and Rosh Chodesh Adar Aleph, like today, was Tuesday and Wednesday. The Rebbe that week made this all into one big, beautiful teaching. So we're going to be focusing on the month of Adar. We're going to be focusing on the Parsha Truma, and we're going to be focusing on Rosh Chodesh falling out on Tuesday and Wednesday, because it's all here to emphasize and to accentuate one beautiful message. So let's take one at a time. It's all going to come together. When the Gemara speaks about the month of Adar, the Gemara in Tractate Tainus says as follows. The Gemara says, "Kishem shemishanichnas av mima'atim b'simcha, kach mishanichnas Adar marbim b'simcha." Just as when Av, the month of Av, enters, we diminish in joy, so too when Adar comes, we increase in joy. Then the Gemara continues and says, therefore, if a person has a quarrel, a fight, a disagreement, Behade Nachri, I think is exactly the term. Behade Nachri, with a non-Jew. In other words, they're going to court. The Jew should try to avoid going in the month of Adar, and should try to arrange that it should happen in the month of, should try to avoid, thank you. Try to avoid that it shouldn't happen in the month of Av. Instead, it should happen in the month of Adar. Now, why, says the Gemara? Because in the month of Adar, this is going to be a very important term tonight. Bari Mazle, the mazel let's just use a simple translation. The fortune of a Jew is strong, is healthy in the month of Adar. Now, so the first thing the Rebbe pointed out is that it's very interesting that you start off by making a comparison. Just as when Av comes, you diminish in joy. When Adar comes, you increase in joy. That connection seems to, in a way, get in the way of the joy of Adar. Instead of saying Adar is such a special month, you tie it to the decrease of joy in the month of Av. Instead of just saying Adar is a great month, we should try to, increase in joy, try to arrange that this court case should take place in the month of Adar. Instead, it specifically ties it to the decrease in joy that takes place in the month of Av. Why is that? So the Rebbe says, truth is that it's the opposite. The ability that the joy of Adar has is not only that we could be besimcha, we could be happy, but the joy that we have during this month gives us the ability to transform also the negative of the month of Av. In other words, by linking the two parts of the year together, that just as the month of Av, we decrease in joy, in the month of Adar, we increase in joy, by linking those two together, the Gemara is teaching us something. The Gemara is saying, I want you to know that the joy of Adar is not just pure joy, it's joy that also transforms negative events and sad times. Which would also explain why this whole discussion about the increase of joy is taking place in Maseches Tainus, a tractate all about fasting, and specifically in the area of that Masechta that's speaking about negative events, because the joy, the simcha of this month is there to transform the negative as well. Now, with that in mind, let's move on to the parsha of the week, Parshas Truma, and it's not just generally the month of Adar that we want to connect to the parsha of Truma, but specifically the month of Adar starting on a Tuesday and Wednesday, because as I said earlier, everything in Torah is exact, and the past 2 weeks I think already we quoted the Shalah HaKadosh, who one of many of the Hasidic teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, as I mentioned this last week, were found in earlier Svarim of the Shalah and the Maharal. So the Shalah has an interesting and beautiful point. He says that although it's very easy to excuse certain things falling out in certain times a year, meaning, certain parshas are read every single year in certain times, and the calendar also works its way. So many times you're going to have parshas Miketz read on Hanukkah. Obviously you're going to have parshas Dvarim read before Tisha B'Av. There's always going to be these things that come together. So the Shalah says a Jew has to realize that everything is perfect. And if the parsha of the week, Parshas Truma, always, every year, falls out around the month of Adar, either right before or right in the beginning of the month of Adar, there's obviously a connection there. So it's not random. It's not just trying to find the connection. We realize that there's a connection. Okay. So let's put Adar aside for a moment, and let's focus on the parsha of the week, Parshas Truma. Parshas Truma, from the beginning until the end, is all about the mitzvah of constructing the Beis HaMikdash, constructing the Mishkan. But it starts with the contributions. The word Truma means offering, gift. The contributions, the donations that were needed for the purpose of the construction of the Mishkan. And it begins with the list of materials that were required to build the Mishkan. And when the Torah begins that list, the Torah goes through 13 things. Some would add, if you calculate it differently, it's 15 things. Either way, the pasuk begins, these are the donations you should take from them. Zav, kesef, unechoshes, gold, silver, and copper. The Mefarshim on this week's parsha say that's an interesting order. Why do you start with zav? Why do you start with gold? You see, obviously there was more copper than there was silver, and there was more silver than there was gold. Even though the Jews at that time were very wealthy, they had a lot of wealth from the Egyptians, but let's assume that the Egyptians also had more copper than they had silver and more silver than they had gold, because that's really what makes gold so precious, is that it's not as common and commonly used. So why is it that the Torah begins the listing of the materials with that which there's fewest of? You should start with Nechosh. In general, in many areas in Torah, we see this expression, min hakal el hakaved, from the easier to the harder. First you ask for nechashis, for copper, then you ask for silver, and then you ask even more for gold. And by the way, I don't want to get caught up in this point so much, but you could really elaborate on this question, because it's been in many mefarshim, grapple with this issue. They say, because if you notice, the rest of the list actually does follow with that theme, that it goes from more common to less to less to less and less, until it has the avnei shoyam, avnei miluyim, which are the fewest. The fewest. Now, the reason why gold shouldn't be first is not only because that's what the Jews had least from, it's also they didn't give as much gold, as much as silver, and as much as copper. They gave more copper and silver than they did gold. So in reality, when we're going to read in a few weeks, Parshas Vayakel, Parshas Pekudei, we're going to be reading about the calculation, the audit of all that was given in. Gold actually is not the first. So why is it mentioned the first in the first place? And the reason why gold is not the first and not the most is also obvious, because the materials that were needed in the Mishkan, there was a need for more silver, there was a need for more copper than there was for gold. So why is gold the first, I don't use the word ingredient, but the first material that's needed and that's asked for in the Mishkan? Now, the truth, and here's we have to get this because we're learning Chassidus, right? So when we're coming from the perspective of Chassidus, we have to add one more question. And what is the lesson for generations to come, for all generations, of the fact that gold is mentioned first? So the truth is, gold being mentioned first is here for a whole nother reason, and it's coming to answer a much larger, deeper question, and a much more basic and fundamental question that should really be bothering us throughout this week's parsha. And in the whole topic of construction of the Mishkan, this question should be bothering us. What's the question? The question is, who's being asked to donate these materials? Men, women, children, everyone, even children. The Medrash learns from the Torah that how halachically do children give is another question, but their children also donated to the Mishkan. In fact, when the Rambam speaks about the mitzvah of building the Beis HaMikdash, not the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash, he says everyone is obligated to be involved, just like everyone was obligated in the times of the Mishkan. The term he uses, Mikdash HaMidbar, as the Mikdash in the Midbar, where in that case, men, women, and children were all involved. So in other words, there was no criteria in terms of, wait, you have to have a little status. We're building here a home for Hashem. You're taking these items, these materials, and creating a space here in this world that's going to be godly. It's going to be holy. What, anyone could do that? That's like saying anyone could. I'm going to use an example, but I don't want to get caught up in the example. It's like saying, oh, it makes no difference who's the cipher. Just anybody could write it. No, here and that's just one sefer Torah, one mezuzah, right? We try, you're Shemayim. We want to be the right person. I'm sure there are many other things in our life that we look for Yer Shamayim to do it. But here we're talking about accomplishing such a great feat, creating a home, no less. Can you imagine a home for Hashem here in this world? And we say, who do we need? Everyone, just everyone. It makes no difference. But what do you mean? I have to work on myself a little bit. No. You don't. Just come, get involved. You would think maybe a tzaddik, someone who's a little bit more refined, a little more edel, a little bit more work than themselves, reach the point where their money is now able to be part of Hashem's home. Oh, now we could accept it. No. Everyone could give it. The Navi says that just as after the building of the first Beis HaMikdash, the expression is written, Hashemayim u'shmei Hashemayim lo yichakulucha af ki habayis hazeh, which means to say that he said, the heavens and all the Shemayim u'shmei Hashemayim, the heavens of the heavens, the highest levels above, are not able to contain Hashem. Not a home for Hashem. But af ki habayis hazeh, will this home, this physical structure, will be able to house Hashem? In other words, it's unbelievable, right? And yet, so now you would think to do such a great thing, you have to have some sort of a status. Who could do it? No, everyone. men, women, children, no matter of the status, everyone is capable of doing this. See, when it comes to like things like even the construction, it comes to other things in the Mishkan, doing the Avodah Kohen, it comes to, Bezalel was the only one who was allowed to make the Kalim. But when it comes to being involved in terms of giving from their possessions, everyone. And really, this question is not just how could you allow everyone to be involved. There's a little bit of a twist here. V'yikhuli truma, right? V'yikhuli. What does Rashi say? Li l'shmi. The giving of these donations had to be given l'shma, for the purpose of Hashem. No other ulterior motives, no other personal reasons. I'm giving this donation. Why? Because Hashem asked for it. So now realize what we're asking of a child to do. And realize what we're expecting and making as if it's so normal. Everyone is capable of this l'shma. Capable of this l'shma? I mean, we all know l'shma is l'shma to serve Hashem just for. I'm going to use an expression the Rambam uses, so beautiful. The Rambam says, in Hilchos Tshuva, he says that when children start their education, so we start with educating them with awe. Sometimes, telling them a little bit of fear. We also start giving them candies and other sweet things for them to do mitzvahs, to study Torah. Uma'at ma'at megalim lahem raz zeh. And slowly, we uncover for them this secret. What's the secret? The secret is, we do what's right because it's right, not because it's sweet, not because it's hurtful, not because I'm scared, not because we do what's right because Hashem wants us to do it. That's it. So that's the definition of Lishma. And the Rambam obviously describes it in a way that he says it's only special people are able to reach there. And here we're talking about in this week's Parsha, every single Jew is being gathered together by Moshe. I mean, they're not gathered in this week's parsha, but that's the mitzvah in this week's parsha. Gathered together and told, give whatever you could, and they actually do. Men, women, and children all give, and apparently they all give lishma. They all give it for Hashem. How does that work? How is it possible that to use a word, a simple Jewish man, a simple Jewish woman, a child has this ability to build a home from their possessions for Hashem? The mitzvah to build the Mishkan in the beginning of this week's parsha comes after Matan Torah, after the giving of the Torah that we learned about two weeks ago, Parshas Yisrael. Only after that does this mitzvah come. Before the giving of the Torah, there was no such idea of making a home for Hashem. Making a home for Hashem started after. What happened at the giving of the Torah? Uvanu v'chartam mikol ha'amim. Hashem chose us. Hashem chose us. What does it mean He chose us? It doesn't mean that He chose our neshama. Our neshama was special before. In other words, was special by being special. It wasn't a choosing. The neshama is part of Hashem. What does it mean that we were chosen? That we were chosen in Matan Torah means that here physically in this world, our physical life, our neshama is our spiritual life. No, our physical being, our physical existence became special in Matan Torah. The past 2 weeks we've been discussing about this break in the rules that took place at the giving of the Torah, which was that up until the giving of the Torah, Hashemayim Shemaim Hashem, heaven was for heaven, there was a divide between godliness and the material world. And we spoke about what that means in the context of doing mitzvahs. We spoke about what that means in the context of bringing the faith into understanding last week. But here it goes even further. You see, the fact that the spirituality of a Jew was special was always true. We had a neshama. That was always the reality. What Matan Torah began and what Matan Torah accomplished is that also in this material world, in this physical world, where we're living as physical people in a world where gold, silver, and copper is valuable. Also there, we are special. To use a Hasidic term, I'm curious to know where this term started. Did it start with the Baal Shem Tov? Did it start earlier? But ever since then, no matter where a Jew is, he has the pintaligid. That's the expression. where that expression began, I'm curious, but it's the idea of the Pintel Yid means this spark that no matter how they seem on the exterior, no matter how they appear in their practice, no matter how they appear in their observance, that Pintel Yid, that point of who they are, that essence, that very essence, nothing could take that away. To the extent that the Rambam writes that every single Jew truly wants to do what Hashem wants, it's just that his Yetzer Hara gets in the way. But you really want to know what a Jew wants? He wants to do what Hashem wants. She wants to do what Hashem wants. That's their true desire and their true ambition. And when we see otherwise, it's because we're not really seeing them. We're seeing that which got in the way of them. And really, and because of that, we have the famous statement the Gemara brings, the Rambam brings it as well in Halacha to say, it's also brought in Shulchan Aruch, that La'olam Yasek Adam B'Torah V'afilu Shaloi Lishma. Shaloi Lishma B'Lishma. Shemitoich Shaloi Lishma B'Lishma. Let me explain that. I'm going to translate that, and then I want to introduce how Chassidus reads that line. It's really a beautiful transformation in understanding. The typical translation, in other words, if you're going to open up an English Rambam, how would it translate? Say, a person should always occupy themselves with Torah. In other words, do Torah mitzvahs. Afilu shaloi lishma, even if it's not for for altruistic purposes, even if it's not purely for Hashem. Why? Shemitoch shaloi lishma ba lishma. Because by doing it that way, eventually you'll do it for the right reasons. That's how we read it, right? That's how we know it. Listen to this. Chassidus reads that same line literally. And when you read it literally, you read it as follows. The reason why you should occupy yourselves with Torah mitzvahs, even if it's not lishma, shemitoich. What's toich? Within the shalei lishma is lishma. The reason why you'll continue doing it and eventually you're going to do it lishma is because the toich, the inner, real, true desire of a Jew who's doing it for other reasons. He's doing it for, I don't know, for honor, for knowledge, for doing the mitzvahs because that's its routine. That's what I was told by my parents, whatever it is. But what's the toich? What's going on within? What's really, really here? What's really taking place is lishma. Doing it because Hashem wants. That's why they're really doing it. And that's something that started at Matan Torah. At Matan Torah, that began, that a Jew, even living in this world, no matter, you see, let me do the contrast. Before Matan Torah, there was a Jew's spiritual life, but when they in a physical life, we were physical beings. In other words, there was a separation between our godly self and our material self. What Matan Torah did, infusing those two, was that even a Jew living in this world, in this, surrounded and preoccupied with many material things, that Pintel Yid, that spark is always there, and that will always be their toich. That will always be their true essence of who they are. So now, as we go back to our question, how was it that every single Jew, no matter of their level, was capable of doing this? Specifically because it came right after the giving of the Torah, right after Matan Torah. Right after this, that every single Jew, no matter who, no matter when, no matter what, it has now this connection to Hashem, regardless of what they're involved in, and regardless of how they seem in the exterior. Now we understand how every single Jew is capable of building Hashem's home, because that essence is true by everyone, and that lishma of doing it for Hashem is also true by everyone. It's the toich, it's the inner reason and drive and motivation of every single Jew. So now, yes, sir.
But everybody also gave gold to the golden calf.
Correct.
No, but not everybody.
I'm saying,
So you're saying that they did that because they didn't know any better?
actually, I would say that not only didn't know, that is a very good example of exactly what we're illustrating tonight, which is that was a Yetzer Hara, but that was not who they were. And that's why when Moshe Rabbeinu, what does it mean? He asked for Hashem forgiveness. What does it mean forgiveness? To forget about it, erase it? No, what was it? We're probably going to get to this in Parshat Kisisa in 2 weeks when we speak about the golden calf. But since you mentioned it, allow me just to take 2 minutes to address that. And I don't want to get caught up in it because I think it does deserve more time. But the idea over here, the whole idea of tshuva, the whole idea of forgiveness, what's really taking place? You know what it is? It's Moshe Rabbeinu saying to Hashem, Hashem, I want to remind you, I want to, not only remind, I want to awaken the connection that you have with them that's deeper than the golden calf, deeper than what they did. What they actually did, it's true they did it, but that was their hands and feet, and it might have been their heart and mind at that moment. But is that really who they are, who their essence is? No. What their essence is you, Hashem. So that's the explanation for tshuva throughout the Torah. The idea of tshuva is to be able to say, a Jew comes to Hashem and says, I know I did something wrong. I did something wrong. But I want to awaken from within me that what I did wasn't really who I am. My connection to you that's who I am. So I think that you gave, by asking that question, you gave an opportunity to actually make it clearer. Here you have gold, here you have gold. But one of them is the true essence of a Jew, and one of them is the Yetzer Hara of a Jew. Yes.
There's a connection, as this lady said, the connection because the calf was made out of gold. And now you're asking the same thing that you did.
It's very interesting you're getting into this because
Yeah.
I think it was the Ramban, and I could check it again, but one of them, a first who asked the question that I started off with, why gold first? You know what they answer? Because Hashem wanted to be clear that this is going to be the ultimate compensation, this is going to be the ultimate tshuva. So there is a link between the two.
Just like Aaron had to give a calf for Carl.
Yeah, correct.
Because he was involved.
With the ego. You have to give not a calf, you have to give a cow. And Gemara says that the mother should come and clean up the baby's mess. That's the expression. But anyways, I don't want to get caught up. Let's get back to our. So now we're back to our question of why is gold first? Why is gold first? If this pasuk was coming to explain the materials that were needed for the Beis Hamikdash, and that's it, the items, the physical, that's true. Gold should have not been first. There's so many better lists, ways, and orders that the list should have been.
Except gold was used for the aura, which was very important.
But why was gold? But why? I'm sorry.
Most valuable.
Oh.
Most valuable.
Right, but the truth is, gold being so simply put. I mean, I'm going to repeat the question from before we answer it. The reason why gold being the most valuable. So first of all, it's questionable because Abnei Shoyim, Abnei Meluim were also very valuable. But my main point to that is, but why is that important? It's not. Why should most valuable be the first on the list? The most necessary should be the first on the list. The most required should be the first on the list. The most that would be given should be the first on the list. The most valuable shouldn't necessarily be the first on the list. That's not. You said that shouldn't be the criteria first on the list. But now I think, says the Rebbe, we have the answer. What's that? By putting gold first, Hashem is telling us that a Jew essentially is precious. And what comes from a Jew is precious. By putting Zav first, it's answering this whole question that really should be bothering us, which is, how could every Jew participate in this? How could every Jew participate in this great accomplishment of building a home for Hashem? Because a Jew is Zahav, a Jew is precious, a Jew is pure, really. And that's why what comes from a Jew is the most precious thing to Hashem. So by putting Zav first, it's really more, it's more than it's describing the material, it's describing the person giving it, the Jew. And if it's coming from a Jew, it's precious to Hashem. You see, Zav, gold, is not just a material. It symbolizes preciousness. And I think that's what you're referring to. And by putting...
Wasn't silver precious?
Anything could be
Anything.
precious.
I know, but in general,
It's the most.
Kesef is so...
It all came
I mean, this
from,
is-
for Hashem.
I'll explain it a little bit more, but Kesef, all these other things are things, like that's why you have coins of Kesef, coins of Nechosha. Zav is not considered Oiver Lasoifer, right? In halachic terms, Zav, gold, is not really something, it's not a currency. At least that's the way the Gemara describes it. But what is gold? Gold is precious. And the Torah starts with gold to tell us every single Jew, no matter who it is really precious to Hashem and is spiritually rich, spiritually wealthy. And not only that, even when dealing with material things, their specialty, their uniqueness, and their value comes out in whatever they give for Hashem. So putting Zav, putting gold as number one, is really describing what's happening here. What's happening here is the most precious thing being given to Hashem. Why? Because it's coming from a Jew. And anything that's being given from a Jew to Hashem is precious to Hashem, and that's why it could serve as Hashem's home. It could serve as a place where Hashem says, "V'shachanti b'soichem," that's where I want to dwell, that's where I want to be. In other words, this is the bottom line. The reason why the Jews at that point were physically and materially wealthy is because at that point they were spiritually wealthy. Their physical and material wealth was an expression of their spiritual wealth. Hashem just gave them this new identity. What's the new identity? That no matter where, no matter what they're involved in, what's their essence? Their essence is godliness. Their essence is their pintalayid, their neshama. That is spiritual wealth. And therefore it embodied itself. It expressed itself in material wealth at that time as well. That is this week's parsha. Let's go back to Adar. What did we say about Adar? We said Adar is bari mazle. The mazel of a Jew is strong. We translate a mazel as fortune. The good fortune of a Jew is strong. It's a very interesting thing to say because there's another well-known Gemara that says that ein mazel Yisrael. That for a Jewish person, there is no mazel. What does that mean? Simply put, that means a Jew is not dictated by mazalis, by anything that happens, the constellations, the stars, and anything like that, the planets. For a Jew, ein mazel Yisrael. We're not dictated by that. We're not under the control and the dominion of these mazalis. And yet you come to Adar and it says, bari mazle. The mazel is strong. Now let me explain that question a little bit. We're not just saying that when it comes Adar, a Jew could switch his mazel from one to the next or something like that, because some explain the idea of ein mazel Yisrael to mean that we're not set on one mazel. If we daven to Hashem, our mazel switches. That's why someone has a birthday, say mazel tov, or something like that, or someone gives birth, say mazel tov. Because we're saying that the mazel should switch to a good mazel. But here we're not saying that. We're saying that the mazel that they have should become bari, should become healthy. So Chassidus explains like this, what?
Only by an individual.
And we're going to tie that in. Chassidus, no, thank you. But Chassidus points out like as follows. The truth is, the fact that a mazel doesn't dictate us is obviously it's obviously true with regards to our neshama. Our neshama is above any mazel because the source of the neshama is in a much greater place than any other thing can have control over that. The real chiddush, in other words, the real accomplishment, that idea of ein mazel Yisrael, that we don't have a mazel that controls us, is to say that even in this world where there are mazalis, and there is this idea of the forces of mazel, we're not set on a mazel. We could daven to Hashem, we could always switch it. But what does Adar do? Adar is an accomplishment beyond that. Adar is saying that even when you're in a world where mazalis are in control, and you have a mazel, and let me use the term the Gemara used, very interesting in this context. And we have a quarrel with Bahade Nachri. In other words, we're dealing with worldly things and worldly people. And in a world where, as I said before, mazel is significant, nevertheless, a Jew has bari mazle. What Adar does is that our connection to Hashem, our godly identity, is not only above our physical existence, but it's within our physical existence. That within our material life here in this world, it's bari, it's strong. And that's why we can, as the Gemara said, you have a court case, schedule it for that time. Why? Because your connection to Hashem will show even within the context of material living and physical living. I'm going to repeat that one more time, just that one statement. Say, throughout the year, ein mazel Yisrael means that we're not set on one mazel. We always have the ability to switch to another mazel. But what does Adar accomplish? Adar accomplishes that even within the mazel, it's strong. In other words, even within a physical life here down below in this world, where we are to a degree under the rule of mazalis, it's strong. Why? Because even there, the connection to Hashem shines. The pintalayid continues to dominate, continues to show. which is very beautifully connected to another Hasidic reading of a Gemara. Previously, we had the Gemara that says mitoich shaloi lishma bo lishma, that within the study of Torah that's not lishma is really lishma. Chassidus also has another reading of this line as well. Ein mazel Yisrael. Doesn't mean that a Jew doesn't have mazel. You're supposed to read it as follows: Ayin mazel Yisrael. What's the mazel of a Jew? It's ayin. Ayin. What's ayin? Ayin is the bittul, that we're completely nullified before Hashem. Our connection to Hashem, that is our mazel. In other words, it's not that we don't have a mazel, it's that we do. And it's extremely, extremely powerful. Why? Because it's oneness with Hashem. That's our mazel. In fact, I just want to take one moment here I know this, again, probably deserve a lot more time on its own, but the term mazel, Chassidus often explains, mazel comes from the same Hebrew word as noisel. Noisel means to drip. What does noisel mean in this context? Ayin mazel Yisrael means that our godly connection that we have with Hashem above continues to drip for us down here below. In other words, it's not disconnected. Mazel means that we're continuously connected to the source of our neshama. It's mazel, it's noisel. There's a flow. There's a flow that continues to affect and influence how we live here in this world. Simply put, we're not only special above the world, we're special within the world. Our unique connection to Hashem, our neshama, our pintel yid, doesn't only override the mazalis of the world, the mazalis of this physical plane, but it actually works within it as well. That within this, a Jew can be special. Within this world, the Jew is dealing with gold, silver, and other materials. Hashem says, it's gold. You're precious. You're precious even when you're dealing with material things in a world where material, physical objects and materials are special, are meaning valuable. Even there, you're special. Even there, you're unique. Why? Because your connection to me is not removed as in just godly, just holy, and not in this world. Matan Torah broke that. Matan Torah shattered that. Matan Torah made this connection as in even the lowest and the lowest. Even, I'm going to use the idea that we spoke about before, even a child who's doing it for personal reasons. Why are they giving tzedakah? I don't know. They were told that if they give tzedakah, it's going to be good for them, whatever it is. Even there, that's the neshama talk. It's what's the taich? What's really taking place here? It's the neshama expressing itself. Yes, it might not look that way. The child is doing it for a candy. The child is doing it for a prize. We might relate to that sometimes as a child too. A person does a mitzvah. They're saying, I'm doing it because, whatever it is. Studying Torah because. Ultimately, the taich, the true desire, ambition, and motive of a Jew is lishma, is because I'm one with Hashem. So now we have the connection between Parshas Truma and Adar, very beautiful. Both of them are emphasizing this same chidush. What is that? That a Jew's connection to Hashem is not only above the world, it's within the world. You see that in Truma, the donations of the Mishkan, that everyone, and that's why Zav is first, as in everything is precious. That comes from a Jew, everything is precious, because a Jew is precious. And in the month of Adar, we also see that Bari Mazle, their mazel itself is strong, it's healthy. You know, it's interesting because the word Zahav, it's brought in different Mefarshim, that Zav is an acronym, a Rosh Tevis. Zeh HaNoisin Bari. That Zav represents a Jew who gives tzedakah in a healthy way. There's a little background to that, but the point is, giving in a healthy way means that every Jew, no matter where they're holding the truth, what's happening here, they're giving it in the proper way, in an idealistic way, an idealistic reason. That's really the motive, which brings that very beautiful historic fact together, which is, when was the Mishkan complete? When was the Mishkan erected and put together? The last 7 days in the month of Adar, right? The 8th day, Vayem HaShmini, was the first day of Nisan. So it was specifically in the month of Adar when these materials were used to build the home for Hashem. Because again, bringing together that theme of Adar and Truma, emphasizing our unique relationship with Hashem within material living, within the physical world. this relates also to the fact that the month of Adar, Mishenichnas Adar, Marba Mesimcha, as we started off tonight. Why? What's real simcha? What's the ultimate joy? A person can have joy because they get this, they get what's real, true simcha that we can always have and always tap into is to know that regardless of where we're holding, regardless where we're holding in our service of Hashem, and regardless of where we're holding physically, if we're feeling in a very good situation or not, we know that Hashem is with us. That is the source of ultimate joy. That's the source of ultimate simcha. So Mishenichnas Adar Marba Simcha. Why is Adar the greatest month for simcha? Because that's the month where we're focusing on Bari Mazle, within, no matter how low I am, no matter how material I'm involved in, it's Bari, it's healthy, I'm connected to Hashem there as well. And not only does that lead to simcha, simcha also leads to this as well, meaning we see the character trait, the trait of simcha, that when a person is really happy, then it affects everything they do. Everything they do. It affects their success in whatever they're doing. It affects, obviously, their relationships, their friendships. It affects their learning. It affects their davening. Whatever they're doing, they're taking a walk. The simcha has an all-encompassing, it envelops a person. I actually used this example last week of someone dancing by a way, right? I don't want to get back to that, but the point is that that's what simcha does. It covers all parts of us. And why is that? Because again, every part of us, not only a person not just saying, oh, I'm so happy, so I'm only happy when I'm studying and I'm not happy when I'm leaving. No, simcha is all encompassing. Again, why? Because we recognize that our relationship with Hashem is in whatever we're doing. If we're dealing with physical things, that's also where our unique connection to Hashem could be seen. When we're dealing with spiritual things, obviously, so whatever we're involved in, it expresses this special, unique, precious connection that we have with Hashem, which makes a very beautiful point. Right? There's a Gemara. Where's the Gemara? The Gemara is also in Tainus. The Gemara says about Hanaf Badchi. You know the term Abadchin? A Badchin. Yeah, Batchan literally means a comedian, almost like. Nowadays, that means Batchanis is poetry and things like that. But what the Gemara is saying, people who are jesters, jesters, right? Okay, that they would get up at a simcha and they would make jokes. These two people, and the Gemara, interesting story there. But the Gemara says that the Gemara relates to those two people and says these two people, they're b'nei alma de'asi. They are the people who will get olam haba. Why? Because they brought so much simcha to people. So the Rebbe says, based on what we learned today, simcha and bringing simcha doesn't only make a person a true ben olam haba, it makes a person a true ben olam hazeh. To really live in this world, the fullest, the most successful and greatest way is with simcha. Simcha is not just a reward in the world to come, as the Gemara speaks there, but now we understand simcha is all encompassing all parts of our lives.
That was the theme of the Yom Tov, as opposed to Shabbos.
That's why on Yom Tov, as you mentioned an interesting thing, ain't simcha ela b'basar, ain't simcha ela b'yayin. This is mitzvah of eating, things that are involved in simcha. Why? Not just because, typically we read that why in Yom Tov there's a mitzvah to drink wine, a mitzvah to eat meat, is because it adds to the simcha. Yeah, that's true. But it's not only that it adds to the simcha, it's that it allows the simcha to express itself even in wine, even in meat. In other words, even in things that are material. A person can say, no, I get my joys from davening, I get my joys from learning. It's still, what is the Gemara, what is the halacha? But still go eat, still go make kiddush. Why? Because we want to express that joy in material things as well, because true joy is that. True joy is like that. It doesn't just, it's not reserved and exclusive to certain areas in our lives. If a person is truly happy, then it affects their whole life. They said about making people laugh. There's a statement, right? Happy wife, happy life. Okay. No, we're not done yet. We said we have, oh wow, it's 32. So I'm going to conclude with this, because I did say we're going to get to ultimately the Tuesday, Wednesday thing. So in Yiddishkeit, right? So in Jewish sources, it's not called Tuesday, Wednesday. It's a Yom Shlishi, Yom Revi, the third day and the fourth day. The Gemara in Shabbos says that the Aleph Bays also have meaning. Aleph Bays, Aleph Chachachma, Aleph Chabina, whatever, and then it says Gimel Daled. What is Gimel Daled? What is 3 and 4? Gimel Dalim. Gimel Dalim means to be generous, Dalim to those who are lowly, to the poor.
That's why the shape of the Gimel and Dalet.
Yeah, exactly. The Gemara says that the shape of the Gimel and Dalet are also giving to the poor. So this theme of the month of Adar and the Parsha of Truma, that even when we are in a low state, involved in material things, also there we are Zav, we're precious and special to Hashem, is perfectly seen in those two words, Gemoil Dalim, that even when a Jew feels very low, a Jew feels very, I don't feel so much on the surface that connection to Hashem. Gemoil Dalim means that even there Hashem is with me. And even there, Zahav, what I give to Hashem is precious to Hashem. And I have to find ways to express that within my living. If it means a person is involved in, see, very much like our example from Shabbos, but finding ways to express our unique connection to Hashem within physical living, not just in shul and in davening and spiritual living, but within physical and material life, like the donations of the Mishkan. That even in those material items, in a world where those materials were very valuable. Who's most valuable? The Jew is most valuable. Yes.
And these connect also to the mitzvahs of Purim, because we're giving to the poor, we're eating, we can feast, sharing.
Very interesting. All 4 mitzvahs. Okay, it's not connected here, but I'll look into it. Maybe next week we'll get to that.
And Moshe was born.
We have 60 days this year to get into Purim. Huh?
Right.
No, but I do want to bring it together. With your permission, I just want to take one more minute because there's a point here to explain how the Gimel Daled is not just random. And that is, there are a few ways in Hebrew, especially in the Gemara also had to describe a poor person. A dal, but then there's a rush. Reish Shin. Reish Shin is someone who's in fact, many cases, rush means ula rush ein kol, the pasuk says, is the lowest form of being poor. And yet, in this context, a Jew is referred to as a dal. A Jew who feels low in this world is referred to as a dal, not as a rush. So the Rebbe says, you know the difference between a dal and a rush is? Think of the difference between a dal and a reish. The little pintele yid in the back. See, the dalid, the reish is lacking that pintele yid. From Matan Torah on, what's that? The little spark, the little yud in the back of the dalid. What does that represent? It represents before Matan Torah, a Jew could be a rush. A person could be a rush. What does that mean? To be so poor, impoverished, so empty, disconnected from Hashem. Why? Because we don't have that inner identity of who we are, that existence of being always with Hashem. So it would be Gemoil Rushim, Hashem giving to a poor, but he's still poor. Gemoil Dalim, now, from the beginning of the Torah on, our relationship to Hashem is very different, no matter how low a person might be. And low doesn't just mean, it means just the very fact that we're here in this material world, where we're living material lives. That we're a dal. But what's the dalid represent? The dalid, in the back of the dalid, there's always that pintala, always that yud, always that represents that wherever we are, we have that inner connection to Hashem that can never leave us. So let's just bring it all together. Adar, Truma, Tuesday, Wednesday, all emphasizing the same idea. That this is a special time of year, where our relationship to Hashem is not only seen in the spiritual living that we live, in the davening and learning, but specifically during this time of year, Bari Mazle, our mazel is strong. Even in a world where mazel is important, even in a world where materials like gold and silver are important, we are Zav and we have a Bari Mazle. Why? Because Gemol Dalim, Hashem is always keeping that connection between him, and no matter how low a Jew is, we always have that connection. Tuesday, Wednesday, Gemol Dalim. Shekayach, everyone. I hope that, I know it was
With
So,
joy.
with joy. Oh, how did I forget? And that's the true joy of a Jew. The true joy is that to know that in every circumstance and every position, every area where we are, we know that that link and that connection to Hashem is always present. Not only is it present, it is our true identity and our true essence.
That's true. Let's dance.
No, in the back of the Dalit, the difference between a Resh and a Shin and a Dalit, what's the difference in the shape? That the Dalit has a back. Yeah. Yeah, more.